listening to AM Ocala Live, WOCA, The Source, 96.3 FM, 1370 AM. I am broadcasting to you live from the Paddock Mall, as the Paddock Mall is still currently closed until further notice in lieu of novel coronavirus, COVID-19. Although mentioned, even that little 10-second ad there, that the Chick-fil-A here at the Paddock Mall is still operating, although you cannot come inside the mall to get it. They do have the temporary drive-through that's open 11 to 2:30, and then they have the mobile curbside pickup app that you can do as well, as the Chick-fil-A here is still rocking and rolling. They're getting set up right now, actually. As we just finished up here with Matt Gibbs, Sunrise Automotive, and before him we had In the Garden with Carol Ann Baldwin. So good Tuesday. Everybody looks forward to the show on Tuesdays. There's a little bit more going on, but of course the conversation always turns to novel coronavirus, COVID-19, of course. But that's just because it affects everybody, and that's how it goes. But a lot of good stuff that we talked about with both of them, and keeps the show rolling. And now, as we approach 20 minutes before the top of the 11 o'clock hour, to round out our show, a segment we didn't get to yesterday, but I'm excited to get to today, as we're going to touch on just a couple more news items, and then we're going to get to On This Day in History, and that's how we'll round out our show. One of the things was yesterday, too, we were talking a little bit there with Lena in lieu of community events and how a lot of community events aren't happening. But there was a few things that we wanted to touch on here, Carlos and I. Was one, we mentioned the very small percentage of the population that can safely drive while talking on their phones. As known as supertaskers, in a study, psychologists identified a group of people who can successfully do two things at once. These people are called supertaskers. It says you're probably not one of them, though. The researchers at the University of Utah said that supertaskers make up only about 2.5% of the general population. This one was kind of disgusting and interesting at the same time, my friend here. This one says that the average sofa will have 6,960 food and drink spillages on it. It says, how many times have you spilled your food or drink on your sofa? Does 6,960 times sound right? Well, according to a study, over the course of a 12-year life of a sofa, will spill food and drinks on it nearly 6,960 times. Now, here's one thing I want to question, though. Over the course of a 12-year life of a sofa, 12 years, that's a long time to have a sofa, or the same sofa, mind you. Mine, before we had ours replaced here this past year, I had mine for 6 years. Let's see, that was 2011 to so 7, so 8 years. We had it for 8 years, which was a long time. And I always looked at the couch going, man, this thing looks dilapidated. This looks bad. And then I realized, man, I've had it for 8 years. And then you start to think about maybe not 6,960 times, but you probably think about all the times that you're like, yeah, I spilled this, had to wash that, did this, the food particles, clean and vacuum. And yeah, that's probably close. For the average life of a 12-year, average times for a 12-year life of a sofa, having that many times stuff spilled on it.
Well,
that's crazy.
I'm not surprised to hear that either, because I remember not specific times where I encountered a situation where I spilled a food or drink on the couch, but I'd be lying if I said I never did at least once.
Yeah. Now it says here, the study says the average couch or sofa will be slept on 612 times. It says we'll watch 5,340 films on the food and drink stained couch, and we'll watch almost 7,500 hours of television.
Who has that much time to watch TV?
Well, welcome to the era of a pandemic where a lot of people have probably spent that much time already in the last 3 weeks. It says here,
that makes sense.
It says, wacky but true, a man disregards lockdown to pick up windows. It says a driver in England disregarded the country's coronavirus lockdown to make a 220-mile round trip to pick up some $20 windows he bought on eBay. And when he was stopped by police, officers discovered his wife in the trunk because there wasn't enough room for her to sit in the car due to the windows. That's a little ridiculous.
Wow, it really is.
That's a little ridiculous. But here I thought it was going to be more about him getting pulled over for not being the curfew and lockdown.
Yeah, me too.
And yet they found out that his wife was in the trunk. That's good stuff.
No, that's definitely a very unusual situation. I would not say it happens very often.
If he had an idea how big the windows were, and why did he take her? I don't know. Probably so they could get out of the house and do something nonetheless. We didn't touch on it yesterday, but there was a few birthdays to mention, and I think it was worth mentioning here that Eric Clapton, good old slow hand guitar player Eric Clapton, turned 75 years old yesterday. And I think what's interesting that is, as I remember growing up listening to the Cleveland rock stations that were usually playing classic rock, and this is classic as it gets. These are almost becoming oldies. As Eric Clapton yesterday was 75 years old. MC Hammer, we know him from, he's actually in a commercial here just lately with the Cheetos, Can't Touch This. MC Hammer and his parachute pants turns 58 years old. And then one other singer is My Heart Will Go On, and hers will go on to be 52 years old. Celine Dion yesterday turned 52 years old. Today, as in today's birthdays, we have this guy's great. I cannot. He's the one impression that I can't do very good, and that's okay because it's so different, and so many people try to emulate his voice and an impression of him. But Christopher Walken is 77 years old. Good old Christopher Walken. That guy, I think, is awesome, and he's in so many movies now. When you look back at his career, so many movies, and he stands out in all of them. Wedding Crashers, one that I just saw recently, which if you're a fan of comic book movies there, Carlos, is in Tim Burton's Batman Returns. Back there in what was it, 1994? He was in that one too, and played a very interesting.
Batman Returns actually came out in 92.
92, yeah, as I say, right in the mid 90s there. Yep. Rhea Perlman is 72 years old. Rhea Perlman from show Cheers, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah, the show ran on. It was on air for 11 years.
11 years, and I watched. I've seen the show in its entirety. I started. It was on Netflix, and I was streaming it, watching it in 2014. I think I began in the fall, and then I finished it in 2017. A lot of time in between, but I was able to watch all 11 seasons. And then as soon as Cheers was done, at the time they had Frasier on the streaming of Netflix too. So I picked up Frasier right from Cheers, as I thought that was worth it. But have you ever watched the show Cheers, partner?
Honestly, I have not. But I do know a song called Cheers by Sleeping with Sirens.
Do you know the Cheers theme song at least? You know?
If I was to hear it, I might recognize it.
Yeah.
But I definitely... I cannot say for sure that I have heard it before, because sometimes that's what happens with me in certain tunes. If I hear it, I'll recognize. I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely heard that before. Whereas other times, I'll definitely not recognize it. It's like, nope, I don't recognize it. They're like, you never heard this?
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how often that's happened.
And like you said, if you heard it, you might not be thinking about it. So I thought I'd give you a chance to, because I know once you hear it, you might be like, all right, as it's one of the best themes of all time.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
Yeah. So, like I said, sometimes I don't know what the rights of it, but it's basically.
Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries
Sure would help a lot.
wouldn't you like to get away? All those nights.
Oh, this is the extended version.
Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name.
It sounds very familiar. Maybe I heard it at least one time. Maybe I'm not entirely sure.
That's the extended version. That's like the entire song. That's not just I thought I was gonna play the quick
Yeah,
thing.
that's usually what they do with theme songs, though.
Cheers, where everybody knows your name, right?
Yeah,
That's
usually
right.
they play when they play a theme song. They play like a more cut version, but then there is an extended version out there.
Yeah, I found a weird version there.
I remember the first time I ever heard an extended version of a theme song was for Malcolm in the Middle. You're Not the Boss of Me Now by They Might Be Giants. I remember the theme song of the show itself is like 59 seconds long, like very short, right? But then the actual full version's over 2 minutes long. So I mean, it's not that much longer, but still, it adds on to it to where it's not so short-lived.
Yeah. This one coming out today here is the 2020 Summer Olympics will begin on July 23rd, 2021, as they're postponing it towards the next season, if you will, or next summer season, and the idea of July 23rd, 2021, as they were talking a lot about it, the IOC, International Olympic Committee, talking heavy about whether or not that was going to run this year or not, but in lieu of obviously everything with COVID-19, they moved it to next summer, 2021. This is a wacky but true. Let the women drive. It says here in Scotland, a man was sitting in the passenger seat of his car while his girlfriend was driving. After he had complained for a solid hour about the way she drove, she stopped the car, switched places with him, and let him take the wheel. He promptly drove the car into a tree. On top of that, when the cops came, they gave him a ticket for driving without a license. Oh, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
It really is. Yeah, sorry, I was gonna laugh with you, but then I was swallowing my water.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. See, some of these things that we get sent through is kind of crazy, nonetheless.
Situations that really stand out.
Yeah. Now, with everything in lieu of COVID-19 and the pandemic, one of the things that's getting aired, and I saw a preview for this just the other day, was tonight's on TV tonight is the NBC News special, Coronavirus Pandemic, as correspondents report on COVID-19 from around the world with experts answering viewer questions. That's going to air tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on NBC as the Coronavirus Pandemic correspondents report on COVID-19 from different places around the world. Now, I think there's value in maybe trying to catch a little bit of this, but then at the same time, too, as much as it's been so much overkill, the undertone is going to be more probably of an agenda to push the idea of continuing to social distance, the continuation of how widespread this has been, global pandemic. And I almost feel like it's worth the value of watching, but it also might be just a little exhausting nonetheless, considering I'm sure it's a lot of stuff we've probably have already heard.
I've definitely heard a thing or two about the coronavirus pandemic, and I'm sure that pretty much everybody has at this point. I mean, it's hard not to know anything based on how much that it was talked about throughout the entirety of March. Like you said, it's been a very, very eventful month for all of us.
With that in mind, in lieu of the theater, it says Hobbs & Shaw 2 is in development. The Fast and Furious presents Hobbs & Shaw made $759 million worldwide last year. Those kinds of numbers usually mean that a sequel wouldn't be too far behind. And now star Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has confirmed that Hobbs & Shaw 2 is in development. And what's funny is I know that it's the Fast and the Furious, and I know it's a stretch of movies, but even when the title came out for that first one, like I said, the Fast and Furious presents Hobbs & Shaw, whenever it's Hobbs & Shaw, it always makes me think of Calvin and Hobbes. It always makes me think of the comic strip rather than the movie. With that, too, is Sony's delay of Ghostbusters Afterlife, along with other films and other studios delaying the release of some of its movies. Sony has announced it will be delaying the release of 5 major films, including the highly anticipated Ghostbusters Afterlife starring Paul Rudd, which that one looks pretty cool because it's like a Carrie it's like a carryover from the story of the second Ghostbusters movie, which those are all very, very good.
I actually know Ghostbusters, but I've never actually seen it. It's pretty good, right?
Oh yeah, it's worth it. It was on TV not that long ago. They had the first one and the second one. A lot of the effects, the special effects, are a little dated. You can tell, but the story's still good because you got classic, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, all good stuff there. As we round out our show here, just to finish up, as it is now time for On This Date in History, as we take a look here at March 31st, as it is the last day of March. And we got ourselves going into April, and it's clouding up out there too, with the expectation of a 10% chance of rain this afternoon, with a 50% chance of rain tonight, which we should expect some wind and maybe some rain into tonight, as it is the final day in March of 2020. Kind of good riddance in a way as we look forward to April. But on this date in history, as we take a look on this date in 1889, it says in France, the Eiffel Tower, or the Tour Eiffel, was opened in March 31st, I don't know if I said that right. Tour Eiffel was opened on March 31st, 1889, and was the work of Gustave Eiffel, who was a bridge engineer. It was made for the centenary of the French Revolution and was chosen instead of over 100 other plans that were given. So it was on this day, I think that's pretty neat, March 31st, 1889, that the Eiffel Tower was opened. That's pretty neat. After that's a long time ago.
The Eiffel Tower and the Big Ben clock in London, I think those are two landmarks that I really would love to see in person one day, because you've seen stuff like stuff that happens in Paris and London and different movies and games and stuff, and then like to see those landmarks in person, I think that would actually be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I got a buddy of mine who he had seen. Just this past year, he said he was on a deployment for his job, and he had spent some time in Paris, and he says, "Yeah, I saw the Eiffel Tower. It was all right." And my buddy and I were talking about it, where it's like, man, he just didn't appreciate it, or I guess his expectations were so like drawn up through, like you said, movies and everything else. And he saw it, he's like, "Yeah, okay." But I think that's what makes it interesting, is just how old and how long it's been there. I mean, it's been through 2 world wars, through a worldwide pandemic of Spanish flu. It's been there for so many different things for so long, and I think that's what makes it kind of interesting too. And like you mentioned, even Big Ben. On this date, moving forward, 1940, on this date in 1940, Winston Churchill. March 31st, 1940, Winston Churchill warns against a German invasion. The first Sea Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, was warned that 1 million German troops are massed on the borders of Luxembourg, Belgium, and Holland, ready to strike, and that England and its allies must be prepared to protect the other countries in forthcoming conflict. That was in 1940, on this day, that he was made aware that it's about to hit the fan, so to speak. Kind of crazy. Moving forward, in March of 1943, March 31st, 1943, the musical Oklahoma debuts on Broadway. This play, written by the famed duo Rodgers and Hammerstein, was originally titled Away We Go, and continues to be produced by theaters across the country. It was originally titled Away We Go, but became Oklahoma. As a musical, Oklahoma debuted on Broadway on this date in 1943. On this date in 1959, India's Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of Tibet, the Dalai Lama, has crossed the border into India after a 15-day journey on foot from the Tibetan capital over the Himalayan mountains seeking asylum. This follows the Chinese repression of the rebellion of the Tibetans in Lhasa. The Dalai Lama is granted political asylum in India, and that was 60 years ago, over 60 years ago in time here, March 31st, 1959. Moving farther along, 1968, U.S. announces, what is it here, that on this date, March 31st, 1968, President Johnson announces on a nationwide television show that he would not run for another term of office, saying, quote, "I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party as your president." Lyndon B. Johnson, 1968. He will not run. He chooses not to run. On this date in 1995, kind of a sad note, on this date in 1995, and I just saw a performance of one of her songs on the American Idol there on Sunday. On this date, March 31st, 1995, Selena Quintanilla Perez, Grammy Award-winning Mexican-American singer Selena, was shot and murdered in her hotel room by the woman who was the president of her fan club on this date in 1995, which a lot of people mourned for her. And man, she was young and she was ready to blow the lid off of her career, man, and stardom. It was on this date in 1995 that Selena was shot.
I know my mom was always a fan of her music.
A fan of her? Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Just a few more minutes here before the top of the 11 o'clock hour, like we said, to round out our show. As one interesting thing that comes up, it was on this date in 1995 that baseball players agreed to end a 232-day strike, which had begun on August 12, 1994, after a judge granted a preliminary injunction against club owners. The strike led to the cancellation of 938 games overall, including the entire 1994 postseason and 1994 World Series. And the reason I'm reading this one so jovial is because sometimes I tell folks that the Cleveland Indians won the World Series in 1994. And people look at me and go, did they? And then I realize, then they realize that baseball didn't happen for the postseason in 1994. But I will say that they were either tied for, or they were in second or first, I can't remember, of the best record in baseball at the end of in 1994 when the Major League Baseball strike had happened. With that being said, that rounds out our show as on this day in history. That rounds out our show for this Tuesday on this day in history as we're making history here. That's right. As myself, Adam, and for Carlos, and for Carol Ann, for Matt Gibbs, as we round out this to get ourselves into Wednesday, which we're looking forward to with March coming to an end, right? Not too bad.
As we April.
That's right. For everybody out there, thank you so much for tuning in, listening to AM Ocala Live. Stay with us for tomorrow. And as I always say, for everybody here at the Source, until tomorrow, right? That's right, Carlos. Until tomorrow.
Until tomorrow.
Goodbye.
People have died because of it, and the rate of infection is increasing rapidly, including in the United States. Nearly 165,000 people in the U.S. have now been infected, and that's led to almost 3,200 fatalities. A report this morning says 90% fewer passengers are flying as compared with 2019 numbers. TSA airport checkpoint figures indicate the number of airline passengers in the U.S. was below the 200,000 mark on Saturday and Sunday. On the same days last year, more than 2 million people made their way through those checkpoints. This is USA Radio News.
Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies.
I tell you, I don't want to really be without it because I haven't really been sick in 2 years. I used to get something, bronchitis, laryngitis, cold, something, at least one. I haven't had any, so that kind of says a lot. It's pretty amazing.
Right now, Balance of Nature is offering 35% off on any new preferred order. Go to balanceofnature.com and use discount code USA.
You know, I've told you I get the best sleep of my life with my MyPillow, but I'm not the only one. Mark in Las Vegas told me the other day, we were talking on other business, he says he went to MyPillow.com, clicked on the radio listener special, and used the promo code USA. He got a great deal on a MyPillow, and he is enjoying his sleep now. You can too. Go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener special, use my promo code USA, and I promise you, you'll get the best sleep of your life or you get your money back.